if you were taught anything about money, you were taught that it was a math problem, right? It was a spreadsheet, a calculator. And that's true. Money does show up in formulas and spreadsheets and calculators, but math and spreadsheets are always rational. 2 plus 2 always equals 4.
Yep.
2 plus 2 never equals envy. And the conversations we see in public are largely still this way, right? Like a lot about the math, the numbers, which budgeting app to use. And all of those things are really, really important. But then we go to have a conversation with a friend or a spouse or partner or a child, and we're suddenly feeling all our feelings.
Hey everyone, welcome to HerMoney. I'm Jean Chatzky. On this show, we spend a lot of time talking about women's struggles with money, the gaps, the stress, the silence, but let's also recognize how far we've come. In recent years, women have made some pretty incredible strides, not just in how we manage our money, but how we talk about it loudly, proudly, publicly. Scroll TikTok and you'll land on FinTalk, the financial corner of the platform where millions of Americans get their daily doses of money advice. The New York Times says people are even leaning on chatbots to figure out how to save smarter, maybe even pick some stocks. I'm not quite sure about that. But here's the paradox. When it comes to real face-to-face conversations about money with the people that we love most, yeah, we don't do it. We clam up. A 2024 survey from Bankrate found that only 38% of Americans feel comfortable talking about their bank balances with their family or close friends. For comparison, people are more willing to discuss politics, religion, health, even their love lives. In other words, basically everything else. So today, we are going to change that because Carl Richards is in the house. Carl is one of my all-time favorite people to talk to about how we talk about money. You may know him as the creator of the beloved Sketch Guy column in the New York Times. His simple hand-drawn illustrations have helped millions of people untangle complex financial ideas. He's also a CFP, the Director of Investor Education for the BAM Alliance, a network of more than 130 independent wealth management firms. And it's been a couple of years since Carl joined us last, but his voice and his wisdom are always around because every time he comes on, he challenges the way we think about money, not just how we manage it. And now he's out with a new book. It's called Your Money, Reimagining Wealth Through 101 Simple Sketches. His big mission is to spark 1 million meaningful money conversations. That's a tongue twister, but let's start with this one. Carl, welcome back. Great to have you.
Jean, always a pleasure. So excited to have this conversation.
I want to unpack FinTalk for a minute and the rise of interest in money and investing, especially among younger generations, because we know that when it comes to sitting down and actually talking about money with people, not people on a screen, but actual people, it's harder than it looks. Why do you think there's this disconnect between people who talk about money publicly and doing it privately?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. And I've been thinking, I'm sure you have too, like what to make of the sort of finance influencer scene. I think I've settled on the idea that for all the dangerous advice there might be, anything that serves as an entry point into having these conversations, into thinking about money is better than nothing, right? Like better than what we had before. So rather than thinking of it as junk food, I think of it as an appetizer, right? Like sort of a way into the conversation. But to your question, I think this is an age-old problem, and largely in our era, I think the problem is that if you were taught anything about money, you were taught that it was a math problem. right? It was a spreadsheet, a calculator. And that's true. Money does show up in math and formulas and spreadsheets and calculators. But what didn't sort of match up with our experience was math and spreadsheets are always rational, right? Like 2 + 2 always equals 4.
Yep.
2 + 2 never equals envy, you know? And I think what happened is we went into the conversation, and the conversations we see in public are largely still this way, right? Like a lot about the math, the numbers, which budgeting app to use, cash, and all of those things are really, really important. But then we go to have a conversation with a friend or a spouse or partner or a child, and we're suddenly feeling all our feelings.
Right. And look, I take a little bit of issue with that Bankrate study that I cited in the opening to this show. I honestly don't think you have to talk about your bank balance with anybody except perhaps your spouse, right?
Yeah,
Your bank
sure.
balance is not really having a conversation about money
Sure.
and how to manage money and how to nudge your resources in a way that you grow them, but also use them to get the life that you want, right? It's more of a, I think we're missing more of the carpentry conversations, the conversations about how you put the pieces together to get to the goal.
Yeah, you use that word nudge, and it's interesting because that implies bumping up against something. And I think that's the part that we're kind of confused by. It's like we touched an electric fence that we didn't know was electric, you know, and some of those trade-offs that we have to sort of bump up against and nudge in like a meaningful life, all of that language, when we're looking at how our use of capital, and I would extend beyond money, but certainly our use of capital aligns with what's important to us. That alignment is bumpy, right? It's clumsy.
Yeah.
It involves friction. It's called being human, right? Like, so sorting that out, and then you add a layer to it anytime there's anybody else involved, a business partner, a spouse, a partner, a child. They have maybe a slightly different view of what's important. It's as if we've been debating, and I think we've just added fuel to the debate. Like we've been debating whether to take a plane, a train, or an automobile on a trip. And maybe even more specifically, which plane, which automobile. And we haven't, the part that we're missing that you're pointing to is we haven't decided where we're going yet. Right? And so that endless debate, although valuable and entertaining and can even be interesting, until we get clear about where we're going, we're going to keep having the same experience where we're sort of frustrated with it and feel like it's not serving us, right?
You have called your new work a conversation grenade, very in keeping with your personality. I think it's something designed to spark big, sometimes uncomfortable money talks. Can you just unpack why you think it's important to blow things up?
Yeah, I have to admit that I'm slightly, like, I love that framing, and I've been every time I use the word grenade, I get slightly uncomfortable, but where I felt better about it is when people use the word like a love bomb. Like that's the nature in which I mean it. All I mean is that you toss this book into a room or you toss a sketch into, and conversations break out. And to your point, there's a part of me that gets a little frustrated every once in a while, and I can hear myself saying to myself, and to anybody else who will listen, because my work is largely an adventure journal, not a self-help book, you know. So like all of this is about me, you know, and my struggles and my problems. But I hear myself saying like, what are we even talking about? Like at the end of the day and at the end of our lives, it's settled doctrine at this point. You're not gonna take it with you, right? And it's not gonna matter to you. What's gonna matter to you is the time that you spent with the people that you love, or the contribution you made to your local communities that grows outward too, right? Like it's either the contribution you made to make people's lives better or time and experiences you had with the people you love. That's what's going to matter. And we have lost the plot, right? Like we put money at the center, money and work at the center, and it's become the organizing principle of our lives. And I'll fit the kids in, right? I'll fit sleep in.
Yep.
I'll fit health in. And I think we just lost the plot. We became the servant.
How do you flip that back?
Yeah, I think we just start talking about it, right? Like gently. Sometimes it's a punch in the nose for me, like a bucket of cold water right on my face. But more often, it's a gentle, empathetic hug, right? Hey, I noticed, right? Like I can give you an example, and this has to do with time, and I've always, like the checkbook and the calendar never lie. If I want to know what you really care about, I can ask you and you'll tell me, and that's called a stated preference. But I can even more importantly watch what you do, and that's called a revealed preference. And revealed preferences are stronger signals than stated preferences. So the checkbook and the calendar never lie. And one time I had somebody install some software on my computer that measured where I spent my time, like what websites I was on. It's called Rescue Time. And I made some claims about, before we did this, we designed an experiment, 30 days. And I said, okay, I never check email after 5 because the kids are around, right? I never check it on the weekend. I don't care about sports enough to spend much. I love sports, but I don't care enough to spend much time on ESPN. I don't care about politics at all. And I would certainly never tune into the other, whichever one is the other for you. And those are the claims I made. Then they measured my time for a month. And then they came back with my stated preferences versus my revealed, my actual, what I said versus what I actually did. And Jean, I can't really, I've shared the story enough now that I don't cry anymore about it, but it took a while because it was horrific.
Yeah.
It was like so crazy to think the number one most important thing to me in my life is time with my family, mainly outside. And I think anybody who knows me would probably tell you that's at least what I say, and it's what I try to do. And I remember saying during that month to my daughter, hey, I can't go on that mountain bike ride with you. And then when it came back and I was like an hour a day on ESPN.
Wow.
There's nothing wrong with ESPN necessarily, but that was not my value.
Yeah. Yes. I would be very, very frightened to do this experiment because I go down these rabbit holes. I think I'm working, right? But I actually am going down these rabbit holes to different news sites, different shopping sites. I get diverted. Well, I don't want to measure how much time it takes out of my day because you're right. Those are the things that are not so important. And I think the same is largely true when you say the checkbook doesn't lie. I often will point people to an exercise of looking back at their spending over a month to see where the money has gone and to ask themselves just a simple, would you do that again? Would you buy that thing again? For me, I find I don't do a lot of like little frittering away, but I find that I like to shop. For me, it's sport. I like to sort of, meander through the stores on a Sunday and maybe I'll spend some money and maybe I won't. And often I don't really care about that stuff in the end. Sometimes I do. I never get mad at myself for what I spend in the grocery store because I like cooking dinner for my family, right? So that's always okay, even if I'm loading up on ingredients on a daily basis. Like that doesn't bother me, but it's the random shopping that sometimes does.
I just think that's interesting just to sort of, you use that word. I love that. It's the first time it's dawned on me that a nudge involves a little bit of a bump. And the idea of bumping up against something is always interesting to me. And I think that's the whole point, is every single person I've taken through that exercise, whether it's time or money, and specifically with money, they are, I would use the word shocked.
Yeah.
Like definitely surprised at what they find.
Well, so we run this coaching program called Finance Fix. And the first thing we do with people, we have them guess their spending. We have them guess. Right. Everybody's wrong.
So good.
Everybody is wrong all the time. Right. And then we use technology. We aggregate their expenses and shocked, open-mouthed, shocked. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah. And so to me, that's if there was a Venn diagram that said your money and your life and there was this overlap, those are the moments where there is no overlap, right? Like your money, your use of capital isn't lining up with what you say is important to you. That gap, when there's a gap between how you use them, I just call it like welcome, right? It's called being human. And like you said, we kind of run away from that information. But I would submit that to the degree that we can handle it with lots of periods of rest in between and plenty of warm baths or the sauna or whatever you need, we want that exposure. Because then what we can do is say, interesting, quick story, because you mentioned food. A good friend of mine wrote the book with his then wife, the Whole 30 book. So Dallas and Melissa. Dallas is a good friend. I took Dallas through this exercise. I said, just go track for 30 days. And I remember we were at a very nice, like, farm to table restaurant when I suggested doing this. He came back 30 days later and he used the word horrific. And it was about how much money he spent on food. Now, here's a guy that his whole career, first of all, he cares deeply about food, loves good quality food. His whole career was about food. His book was about food, right? Like, and so at first it was like shock, and he used the word horrified. But then as he processed it, he was like, wait, and that's one of my core values.
It's what he cares about. One of his things.
Yeah, so he started to get some alignment around it and say, this other thing over here, I don't really like that. So it was just a process of saying, I'm going to spend more on the stuff that I care about and value, and I'm going to feel okay when I do it. I have often refer to it as getting full value. Like when you go to put the credit card down at the dinner with your friends at your favorite restaurant, because that's a bunch of core values, great food, experience, your good friends, like you place that with happiness and joy. Yep. It's an investment. Get full value. Don't be like, oh, geez, I can't believe it was that much. Get full value for it. And then when you go to the other place where you're like, yeah, I don't really like that, feel really good about not buying anything there. Like that's the idea, right?
And if you have the dinner with the friends and the check bothers you, but the time that you spent with your friends was enjoyable, you just have to choose a different restaurant, right?
Beautiful.
You have you just have to figure out, okay, I'm not a $30 entree person, I'm a $20 entree person, so let's find that place, right?
Yeah,
or go on a walk. Exactly.
Like I love that idea of what we're doing here is not saying, do I care about the restaurant or eating out? We say, what's the value I'm trying to express?
Yeah.
Friendship, quality experiences, beautiful food. Okay. But if it didn't include beautiful food, it was friendship, quality experience, you could then say, oh, interesting. That's one way of expressing it, the restaurant. Are there other ways? Right? And so now we're creating, and it turns out it might be cheaper, but that's not really even the point. The point is, how are we investing in that value that sits underneath the spending? And back to your very first question, like, how do we get better at this? We start exposing ourselves to that information and start asking. Look, it's happening everywhere. Just simple mindfulness, awareness practice around your use of money.
You have a sketch in the book that calls out how many people are turning to ChatGPT and algorithms for financial advice. We'll post it with the notes for this episode because it's worth looking at. And you write, humans don't fit neatly into algorithms. As a financial planner, how do you view the advice that's being generated by ChatGPT, by Perplexity, by Claude, by AI in general?
Yeah. Well, two quick thoughts. The first is that this sketch, I drew that sketch 10 years ago, back during the dawn of robo advice, right? And I was curious, is it still, when it came up as one of the ones in the draft of the book, I was like, is this still true? So I thought no better way to find out than to talk to ChatGPT about it. So I uploaded the essay, I described the sketch, and what Chat said was, this is more important than it's ever been, right? And what we worked on was a little nuance, which was what you read. We don't fit in the box, but life, money, and markets are messy. Algorithms can analyze patterns brilliantly, but here's the point. They can't feel the anxiety of a major investment decision, or the pride of achieving a financial goal, or the responsibility of providing for a family. All of those, I remember working on that line and was like, that's exactly what we're talking about. So, and the second thing I would say is I'm a huge fan and super excited about self-driving money. I think we're really close and I can't wait. But I've been in a Waymo recently and it was incredible. In fact, I'll tell you, it was way safer. It felt way safer than the Uber right before. But I still had to tell it where to go.
Yep.
And maybe even more importantly, as we drove through Los Angeles, if I saw something that I was like, oh, you know what? I've changed my mind. I'd like to go that direction. Or can you stop here? I want to get out at that store, which happened. I was still the one that needed to tell it to do it. And so I think those things can exist at the same time. So I would just be very, very careful. I think to your point, it's early days in terms of specific financial advice, but we're getting there. And this is great. Like in the hands of anybody, this will help us make better decisions. And we're back to where we started. What's it all for?
Right.
Like, why are we doing it? Because who cares if you build the best design I've never been to an efficient portfolio party. I've been to a mortgage payoff party. There's a reason, right? One of them connects at a visceral level to something that is human. And chat, no AI tool is ever going to tell you, pay off your 3% mortgage, you'll feel better. And that might be great advice for you.
Carl, can we dig into the stock market? The volatility is up. I just ran some historical numbers for the book that I'm in the middle of writing. And we've got simultaneously major banks sounding the alarm on the possibility of a recession in, if not this year, in fairly short order. How do we deal with the ups and the downs and the roller coasters and the emotion of it all?
Yeah, what a sort of classic age-old question, right? And it sounds like you have the data on volatility, but what I always start this conversation with is that it doesn't really matter whether it's actually more uncertain. It certainly feels that way to all of us. And since perception is reality, it's all that matters. The truth is the data says the same thing, right? There's a reason we all feel this way. And I think even underneath that, what's showing up in the equity markets is this a bigger piece of uncertainty that we're all feeling as this move from traditionally collective solutions like profit share or pensions, even Social Security, like these collective solutions have all moved to individual solutions, right? And the kind of predictable path of progress that you and I saw our parents live, and even to a large degree we lived, isn't so predictable anymore. So you got all that, right? All that. So what do you do? So I think the first thing to realize is that volatility is built into all of the historical data that helps us build portfolios, right? Markets have gone up and gone down for a long time. And so to the degree that you can take the weighty evidence of history and project it into the future, it shouldn't surprise us when markets go up and down, right? Like just at a base level, it surprises us when or why. Don't get me wrong. Like I would never pretend to know when or exactly why, but the fact that it happens shouldn't come as a surprise because it's built into the data. And therefore the portfolio, if you design a portfolio based on your values and goals, based on weighty evidence of history, your portfolio should match where you're trying to get to, right? But that's a little bit like Churchill's quote about democracy. What I just described is Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government ever created by the mind of man, except for all the others.
Right.
And what I just described is the worst way to invest your money ever created, except for all the others, because there's no way to, in the end, get rid of all that volatility. So that's point number one. Point number two is, guess what? You don't have to. There's nothing un-American. There's nothing about not having large amount of exposure in the equity markets, right? You can just pull other levers.
Like what? I mean, when we're talking about our investments helping us get where we want to go, helping us save for retirement,
Yep.
Not having exposure to the equity markets comes at a sizable cost, and the cost is just that you have to save a whole lot more.
Sure. The question, and I want to make sure I stated it really clearly, you don't have to have a large exposure to the equity markets. And to be honest, you don't have to have any if you wanted to. You just pull other levers. You save more. You retire differently. You can replicate some of the old-fashioned pension-style products. I know that's some of the work that you're thinking really carefully about. But here's the deal, right? Like, it doesn't matter if your plan says you need to be 70% in the equity markets as a 35-year-old, and that's totally possible and maybe even a good idea. But you have proven that you cannot sleep at night despite all of the evidence. Like, you're super smart. You've read all of Jean's work. You've read everybody's work that you should, and it still causes you massive anxiety. Well, right. That's a different type of help. And maybe you've proven to yourself, because the only thing that, if you can't stick with it,
Yep.
there's no sense in doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think that makes total sense. On that note, as we are saving for retirement these days, as we're accumulating money, there are a lot of solutions that can sort of help us manage the portfolio building of it all. There are target date funds. Are they perfect solutions? They are not perfect solutions, but they're pretty good, right? You can put your money in them if you can stay the course, and if you save sufficiently, you can get where you want to go. Are there other ways that you suggest that people solve this problem? Right? Using a financial advisor, I think, is a fantastic way to do it. But if you want to DIY it, what are your go-to methods for building a simple portfolio that people can generally live with?
Yeah. So it doesn't have to do with portfolio construction per se, but one of my favorite solutions for this challenge of saying, look, I'm not sure I want to take that much risk, or I'm not sure about the equity markets, or the economy's got me really scared, is to change the definition of retirement a bit, right? And I saw this a lot with clients. Like, instead of thinking, and in fact, I was just having this conversation with somebody who is 52 and convinced that he's got to work 8 more years. Hates his job, but in 8 more years, right, he'll be able to, basically 59 and a half, just a little bit beyond that. Now, I know there are some other ways to tap into retirement account, but just for the sake of simplicity, 52 years old, doesn't like his job at all, has been saying this for 15 years, right? Like, hasn't liked his job forever. He's just like, I just got to stick it out, because he thinks that he's going to work till he's 60 and then retire and be done. We had this conversation where, like, well, are there things that you would like to do? Right? Is there a job that you would like to do? He's like, I'd love to teach at the university. He's got his PhD. He's like, I'd love to just teach. Don't do any of the admin stuff. Just teach at the university. I'm like, well, how, and when we went through the numbers, we're like, could you get paid enough to teach to cover your expenditures, and you didn't have to save for retirement anymore? Let's say, pretend like you didn't save for retirement anymore. It was just your living expenses. Could you, and how long would you like to teach? He's like, well, I could see myself doing that. Like, he's like, I don't want to really retire. I just don't want to be in this job anymore. So suddenly he's like, look, I could, from 52 to 70, I could see myself teaching. 75 even. He's like, I've got professor friends of mine that were set in their 70s. I would love to be that. I'd love to do that. I could go through lots of examples like that. The doctor who wants to teach at the med school. Another friend of mine who always wanted to work at a plant, I guess you call them a plant nursery, right? There's a really cool nursery here that gives health insurance benefits for anybody who works 30 hours or more, right? So that was another one. So now suddenly we've gotten to this point where instead of thinking you were going to retire at 60 and then start tapping the retirement money, you are going to, have a sense of purpose for a lot longer. Because believe me, this retirement concept is, other than some of the sort of manual labor jobs, this retirement concept is overblown. Like, most people who go full gas with a sense of identity and purpose tied up in their jobs and then try to retire find that it's not what they hoped it was. Right? They've got to fill that hole somehow. So if we start thinking about that a little earlier, so A, a sense of purpose and identity. B, you relieve a bunch of pressure on the portfolio.
Right, because every year you don't have to pull money out, right?
Yeah.
It is a year it can continue to grow, is a
At
year
a
that you don't have
decade.
to cover, right? And decade after decade after decade. I was thinking about the same concept earlier today because I'm moderating a panel at a conference upcoming with some people who have sort of retooled their lives after the quote unquote big career. And there's a woman who was a high pressure powered marketing executive, now working as a flight attendant.
Right.
Loves it. Traveling,
benefits.
doing the
Yeah.
travel
Yeah.
that she
Yeah.
always wanted to do, and not withdrawing the money from the 401k.
This to me is a much more powerful conversation than the particular. Look, portfolio design is really important. Other options, laddering CDs. There are some amazing insurance products that can help with this sort of thing, longevity sort of stuff. And again, careful, specialized tools require specialized expertise. And those are important discussions. But I think this discussion is way more important because it gets the identity and fulfillment and meaningful life part is embedded in there as well. And if you could add 5 years, 10 years, in some cases, 10 or 20 years to the growth of a portfolio, suddenly it relieves a bunch of that pressure. So that's actually my favorite way to think about how to solve that problem.
I want to talk about one other concept in your book with the time that we have left, and it's the concept of future blindness. You say that we underestimate the complexity of our future financial lives. What does that mean, and how should we be opening our eyes to the future?
Yeah, and a lot of this was informed by Hal Hershfield's work on like his book, Future Self. We're pretty bad at relating to somebody 10, 20, 30 years in the future. Like we relate to them like we do a stranger. And so that leads us to one part of future blindness, which is we're not very good at caring for that person because we don't really relate to that person. So just checking in every once in a while. That's what some of the data around those pictures that age you, like that's what all those exercises are about, is just for you to start caring a bit about that person and just building that into your plan. And then the other thing that I think as humans, we're not very good at anticipating how we'll solve a problem before it happens. We're not very good at that. If you look at the history of risk management in the financial markets and even the economy, risk management historically has been taking something that happened that you didn't expect, but taking something like we did this in the financial crisis, we did this in COVID, like we've done this over and over. We take something that's happened and we prepare for that to happen again. But we don't know what's going to happen again. But one thing that we can be hopeful about is we may not be very good at anticipating future problems. We're actually pretty good at solving them when we're in them, sort of the old school MacGyver style, right? Like I've got bubble gum and duct tape and a screwdriver and I can put this thing back together. So I think being thoughtful, if you blend those two ideas together, you be thoughtful about what your future self might need. And it's not hard to understand what those things would be tactically, right? Like you're thinking about healthcare and the type of house you live in and the type of travel you may want to do. And you just look around at people that are 20 years older than you and you get a sense of that, right? And you can say things like, well, there's a 75-year-old who's still skiing and there's a 75-year-old who can barely move. What's the difference? Which one do I want to be, right? And then you mix that with the idea of like realizing you're going to be pretty good at solving problems when they actually come up. And I think you just hold those two things carefully. Like, I want to be thoughtful about the problems. I don't want to be so thoughtful that it ruins my life today. And I want to realize I'm going to be good when I get there, right? I think those things can be held in tension.
The book is called Your Money, Reimagining Wealth Through 101 Simple Sketches. Carl, thank you. Thanks for doing this. Come back soon.
Yeah, Jean, it's always a pleasure. I do a lot of these interviews as you do, and it's always really apparent when somebody cares about the work that they're doing and cares about the people who are listening. So thanks for the work you do.
Oh, right back at you.